Good evening, folks. 7 p.m. Thursday. That means it's Facebook Live time. I'm glad you could join us. Good to have you with us this evening. It's a lovely, warm evening here, so we've got the door open, trying to get the fresh air coming in. But it sounds like some people might have started their VE Day celebrations a little bit early, so I do apologise in advance if we get a lot of background noise. And I think we've got somebody revving a motorbike and all sorts of stuff. But we will do our absolute best to bring you this session this evening. Now we've got a couple of things that we're going to be looking at, and I hope that you're going to get your questions in to us as well. So the chat is open, so get on there, give us a question. Now it's about tech related stuff, but you know, throw me a random question and put me on the spot if you want. There's a challenge for you, because I can always bluff and waffle at an answer, and if you want to see me do it, then here's your opportunity. A couple of things that we will be looking at tonight, a couple of questions, and I'm just going to pull up my list on here. We're going to be talking about content filtering and why it's important to content filter for your employees and for your kids, depending on which angle you're coming at from. Remember, the web is not a safe place by default, but can be if you know what you're doing. And then the second thing we're going to be looking at is the old adage, you get what you pay for. Is this true in IT, or can you do things on the cheap? So we're going to be looking at that. I'm going to be specifically looking at laptops, but it will apply to other things as well. So there are a couple of things that we've got lined up. I'm going to cover those in a minute. As always, I'm just waiting a little bit while people get online, and I know that it can take a few minutes for people to get settled down, and for the link to be shared, and for us to get people on and watching. So I hope you're all doing well. I hope you've had a good week. Hope that you're all staying safe. Going to be an interesting weekend, I think. We're all here in the UK waiting for the announcement on Sunday from our Prime Minister Boris Johnson about what's going to happen regarding the lockdown. We're kind of expecting things to be released a little bit, so we may get some of our freedoms back. That will be quite nice, I think. We've had 6 weeks and we're all feeling a little bit cooped up, got a little bit of cabin fever, so I think we'll be quite glad of maybe a little bit more freedom. Obviously, don't expect a lot. I don't expect the schools will be going back just yet. I don't expect the pubs and bars will be opening just yet. So it will be interesting to see what happens. Some people may well be going back to work though. Will people actually go back to work in their offices, or will people continue to work from home? That's a very good question. I've just asked that myself, so there's a question this evening. Let's answer that one now. I actually think more people will be working from home going forward, because I think we've kind of all experienced it and realised that, hey, do you know what? There were no major disasters. It could actually work. So it gives a little bit more flexibility. We can use our cars less, which means we can have a positive impact on the environment. We have seen over these last few months the positive impact that it's had with us not using our cars so much, the increase in air quality. And I think it is showing that the major problem we've got is our burning of fossil fuels. So if we can stop the burning of fossil fuels, then we can really make a difference to the planet. We can use the technology. Now, I know the technology uses electricity, and electricity can be used by the burning of fossil fuels, but clearly that has less of an impact than you getting out in your car and trucks and planes and all that kind of stuff, moving about the planet and polluting it. So there we go. And be interesting to know what you think about that. So let's get cracking on the couple of questions that I wanted to talk about. So actually, I'm going to start with the second one. You get what you pay for. Is that true in IT? Or can you do things on the cheap? Right, simple answer to that is, it is true in IT. You do get what you pay for, but like in many things, you can also overpay as well. And there's always that sweet spot where you've got a really nice balance between quality and price. And this question got me thinking the other day of, broadly, laptop buyers seem to fall into two categories. Broadly, okay? So you've either got the person that goes into Currys or PC World and buys a cheap Windows laptop, spends about 300 quid or something like that, okay? Then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the person that will go out and buy an Apple Mac at $2,500, okay? These kind of two spectrum, and that's what we tend to see most of in terms of the machines that we have to deal with. We're either dealing with an expensive Apple Mac machine, or we're dealing with a cheaper lower end laptop. Now, we do have some in the middle that buy a decent quality Windows laptop, but we don't see that so much. Now, I think this is interesting because when we get this perception, right, that Windows laptops are cheap and nasty, and MacBooks are the way to go if you want something of quality. But that's not true either, because you can get quality Windows laptops that will match a Mac for quality and longevity. The problem is that we don't seem to have that mindset of buying a quality machine when it comes to Windows. And we absolutely should, because there's some fantastic top quality machines out there. Now, going back to that original question of, well, should you buy cheap or do you get what you pay for? You absolutely do. I've just got a couple of things to show you here. So here is a cheap Windows laptop. It's a Lenovo. It's a few years old. I think it's about 2013. It's got an AMD E1 processor. You've never heard of that, have you? It really was the cheapest processor you could probably get. Okay, so this was probably a few £100 laptop, right? Now, I've tried using this, and it is slow, right? It's excruciatingly slow. I tried to do a video call on this earlier, and the thing crashed. Okay, so that was 200 quid, 300 quid spent 7 years ago, and the machine pretty much useless. Right, this MacBook Pro from 2006. So it's older than the Lenovo that we looked at. This will have cost a lot more money. You will have been talking a four-figure sum when this came out. Can't remember off the top of my head. If you have any rough idea how much these would have cost in 2006, whack that in the comments. Okay, I did exactly the same thing on this. Okay, and you know what? It was superb. This is a machine that's 14 years old, and for a lot of tasks will still cut the mustard. Right? That's amazing, isn't it? Why is that? The simple fact is that the MacBook was a quality purchase at the time. So although it was a lot more money in terms of the value that has offered, it's much, much better. It's still going. Now, I can't use it for everything, and in many respects a lot of it's out of date. So there's Firefox on there, it's out of date, so there are some things that just won't run. I can't run Zoom on it and things like that just because it's out of date and a lot of things aren't supported. But the fact is, because it had good quality hardware, it's still amazing how much it keeps going. So this might get us onto the Windows versus Apple debate, and I'm not really going to go down that route. But some things to remember. It is definitely best to look for quality when you're buying a computer, whether that's a Mac or Windows. Don't automatically assume that a Windows machine is unreliable and cheap and nasty. It can be. And don't automatically assume that if you want quality, you want a Mac. Now, the thing with Macs is you don't get cheap, nasty Macs because Apple control the hardware and the software. So they're always quality, so we always associate those with quality. The trouble with Windows is it goes on all sorts of machines, whether it's quality or cheap. So I would always be looking to buy quality. The price point for me, where you start to get decent stuff with laptops, is about £500 at the moment. You start to be looking over that when you're looking at getting solid state drives in them, yeah, and a good size solid state drive like 256 gigabytes, maybe pushing it towards 512. When you're looking at least 8 gigabytes of RAM, and really add like 16, yeah. And when we're looking at kind of an i5 processor and something like that, that's going to last. Not the cheap bottom end processors. You'll still see Pentiums and Celerons bandied about. Avoid those, whether it's in a laptop or a desktop, because they're just cheapy, and they might last for a couple of years, but you'll have the same problem that we had with that Lenovo there. It won't last. Now, okay, if you're thinking I only need it to last a couple of years, or that's all I can afford, fair enough. If it gets you online, it gets you going, but you will have those frustrations in a few years' time. Now, the same thing applies across everything else with desktops as well, with keyboards, with mice, with monitors. We've got some monitors in the office that are donkey's years old, but they were quality and they're still going strong. So that's absolutely fine. So in terms of actually helping the planet, buying quality helps, because we're less likely to throw the things away and we will get much more life out of them. So do you get what you pay for in IT? You absolutely do. Now, I'm just going to now finish this off with the fact that we also get ripped off a little bit as well. And I'm going to point the finger a little bit at Apple here. So I was just looking at pricing one up for a client the other day, and like the jump between like 8 gigabytes and 16 gigabytes of RAM was getting on for like £200. Well, that's a bit of a disgrace, because the actual part itself is probably about £40 or £50. So we pay for quality, we often overpay for quality, so we do have to watch out for that as well. So there we go. So if you're in the Mac camp, you'll be quite happy with what you've got. You probably have overpaid for it, but also at the end of the day, it is probably going to last as well. So there we go, horses for courses. So that's the end of that first question. Next question, the next thing that we wanted to look at was content filtering. Should you have content filtering to control what your employees can see online and what your kids can see online? The answer to that question is, of course, absolutely yes. What gets me actually is the amount of domestic routers that don't do a very good job of this at all. In fact, that don't do a particularly good job of monitoring and controlling access to the internet. Because for me, right, if I'm thinking of my kids, may want to control access to the internet. So there may be times when I want them on, times when I want them off, and when they're on, I may want to limit what they can actually watch. Now, a lot of domestic routers and the stuff you get from the ISP just does not sort that out of the box. So, you may get parental controls with your ISP, but they're not very granular. They're a little bit hit and miss, and I don't really like them. And I'm surprised that, after 15, 20 years of the internet, and the internet being in lots of homes, that we still haven't really got this sorted out. So the bottom line is, you end up having to pay for a better router, but most people probably don't know that and probably don't do that. So we know that for our kids, we want to protect what they see online, but we also know that it doesn't work so well, and then they get mobile phones and they go on 4G connections and stuff like that, and so we need to look at ways of integrating it. The way to do that is to buy products that put little apps on the phones that connect you back up through the system that you use at home. So we can so when you're actually browsing the web, and the system you use to browse the web and the system you use to interrogate all the web addresses, and so that your computer knows where to look for them, needs to be the same on your home stuff as it does on your portable devices. And there are systems that will do that. The same really also applies if you've got staff, and you might want to control what your staff can see on the internet. And you might think, why? Why should I do that? Isn't that a little bit Big Brother? Isn't that a little bit dictatorial? Because these are adults. Well, there are some things that you need to be aware of. Two things, actually, I think you need to be aware of. The first thing is security. That is really important. Now, you might not actually be bothered about whether your staff go on certain sites. You might not be bothered about that. You might be quite lax about it. But what you shouldn't be lax about is the fact that the sites they go on could download something or install something on their computer that ends up on your network, ends up compromising your data, ends up bringing the system to a halt. That you should be concerned about, and for that reason you should be controlling what your employees can do online. And that needs to happen whether they're in the office or whether they're remotely. If they're connected up to your network, if they're connected to the stuff that you use, and that's even cloud stuff. Don't think, all our data's in the cloud. If they upload a file to Dropbox or OneDrive that's got a virus in it, when somebody else downloads it, they've got the virus in it. So you're not protected just because you're in the cloud. So you've got to think a little bit cleverer. Now, the second thing is also, it is about productivity and whether you actually do want staff to, say, be on Facebook or YouTube or stuff like that. And you might say, well, actually, we use Facebook and YouTube as part of our marketing. That's absolutely fine, but you can still regulate when it's used and who uses it. Does everybody need to be on it? Or is it just the staff that are responsible for posting on Facebook and YouTube and things like that? So there are two things. There's the productivity, which you may or may not be bothered about. Personally, I would be bothered about, to be honest. And then the second thing would be, more importantly, the security side of things. So, yes, content filtering is really, really important, and it's often overlooked. Antivirus software doesn't cover it. This is something else entirely. Okay, so you need to look at some other systems. Windows did it for a while with Windows Family Safety and things like that, which is an interesting little tool. But again, it only really works on your Windows computers. It doesn't work when you get it on your mobile phones. And that's always been the thing for me, is particularly with kids, is mobile phones. But even your employees, a lot of stuff is done if you've got people out in the field. They're using tablets, they're using mobile phones, they're using Android or iOS. Okay, so the tools that work with Windows or work with a Mac might not necessarily work with that. So it can be really, really frustrating finding solutions that work. And I find this frustrating. There needs to be a better range of products that work across more devices, and it doesn't always happen. So it can, you could end up having to kind of do a bit of this, a bit of that, and a bit of the other to get a solution that works. But they are there, and it can be done, and you should be thinking about it. So there we go. So, right, well, I hope you have enjoyed things this evening. We're going to be wrapping up now. Nobody gave me a question and put me on the spot. Never mind, there is always next week. But thank you very much for watching. If you do think of anything in the meantime, then do pop onto our Facebook page, Red Fez Computing. Ask it on there, and of course we'll get back to you. Pop onto our website, redfez.co.uk, where you can always contact us through the contact form if you want. We also have a blog on there as well, so we're regularly posting on there, putting on lots of extra information. We'll also be putting on this video as well, and there's some product reviews and things on there as well, and they will point through to our YouTube page. We are on YouTube. Red Fez is on YouTube, so do search for us on there. The other thing you could do is pop on to, if you're on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. You'll find me on there as I Red Fez, so you can ask your questions through there as well. So thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your evening. If you're partaking in the VE Day celebrations tomorrow, enjoy those too. Have a good extended weekend, and we'll see you next week.